My name is Liz Holcombe and I'm the web manager here at the Australian War Memorial.
Okay, and can you tell me a little bit about your social media program?
Social media program is a little, it's very interesting. We're using a number of different sites. We're using Flickr, two sorts of Flickr, and I'll come back to that. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and we're also using a couple of WordPress blogs. The Flickr, we have ordinary or vanilla Flickr as I sometimes call it, where we're using or putting up photographs taken by our own photographers. We've also got a couple of groups on there, one for the public to upload their images taken here at the memorial, another one for an upcoming exhibition called Of Love and War, where we're hoping people will share photographs and letters indeed. And also on Flickr we're using Flickr Commons, which is a personal favourite of mine, I have to say. It's fantastic. We've only got 91 images up there, and we started in November 2008, but the response has been fantastic. We've got something like 87,000 views of just those 91 images. It's remarkable, yeah.
So what sort of images do you want people to put up for your Love and War exhibition?
At the moment, anything that relates to people being in love and at war. There's some lovely images of weddings and couples. There's some beaut ones of letters that people have written to each other, and a lot of them have got little stories as their captions, and they're really quite touching.
So maybe talk a little bit about the policy you have with photography inside the memorial. People are allowed to take photos?
Yeah, people can take photos. The only thing we don't allow is people to have tripods or monopod things, and that's more an issue of other people tripping over them than anything else. The only time that we didn't have photography allowed was for one of the Lawrence and the Light Horse exhibition, where we had some stuff loaned from overseas, and the people who loaned them to us said no photography. But that's the only one I can think of where we haven't allowed photography inside. And it's really interesting seeing the photos that the people take. It's almost the best visitor survey that you could have, because they put up the things that they're really interested in. It's a really interesting way of seeing what attracts people's attention as they go around the building. Yes, on the vanilla Flickr, that is the most response, that people actually uploading their own photos. We have had a few little conversations where people have put up an image of something they've seen, and they said, I forgot to write down what this is, can anybody tell me? So then I will respond and say it's whatever it is. And a couple of times people have said, oh, that's really cool. Well, I've got this other thing over here, can you tell me what that is as well? So we have that little conversation, and that's kind of nice.
And your YouTube?
YouTube, we've got about I think 12 videos on there, and that's a mixture of collection videos ranging from 3, I think, shot in the First World War, one about a nice tank, one about the funeral of the Red Baron, and the other one was shot by a guy called Ashmead Bartlett on Gallipoli. And we've also got material from the Vietnam War, again from the collection, as well as footage that we've shot of, for instance, the conservators working on a First World War tank, the installation of an exhibition, and last year we projected some images onto the wall of the memorial, and we've got some footage of what those projections look like. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, I guess.
So your core audience, are they people who normally use technology, or are you going to get a new audience? Is it opening up a new audience? Or?
That's an interesting question. I think it is. Well, it's certainly on Flickr Commons we're opening up a brand new audience of people who I don't think come to museum websites to look at content. On YouTube it's probably a new audience, and the social media sites are interesting because they give you good demographics, especially YouTube, so you know how many blokes, and on YouTube it's blokes mostly. There's a lot more men than women on the YouTube channel, but on Facebook it's a lot more women than men. I don't know what to make of that. And the age group is pretty close. The age group on the social media sites like Facebook and YouTube is pretty close to what we get walking through the door. So you can't say that it's, the young technologically savvy people who are using our stuff on those sites. It's the over 35s, up to mid-50s.
Okay. And can you talk a little bit about CAN and how you could see the War Memorial potentially using CAN once you get your collection online? Oh, on our site.
On your site.
On our site.
I think one of the really interesting things to do would be to make connections between the collections. Now, I haven't really talked much about our blog, but a recent blog post that that one of our staff put up on a woman called Valerie Briggs, who worked for the CSIR in the Second World War, draws a whole lot of things together in one fantastic little post. He mentions CSIR, which is now the CSIRO. He mentions a woman called Miss Plunkett, who apparently was a very important figure in that organisation. He talks about food preservation, the sorts of work that the CSIR did during the Second World War. The fact that this woman, Valerie Briggs, went to work there when she was 15, that's a story itself. And I'm sure there must be lots of collections across CAN that could provide more information to fill out that story. So that's the sort of thing that I think would be really useful to be able to do, make those connections. I would imagine CAN appeals more to the museum workers than the general public. But the more links that you make, the more things you publish on the web, the more things are linked to and from each other, the more likely the general public are to find it anyway. So while you might start talking to a museum audience, you could end up talking to who knows who. It could be really exciting. So this is the little blog post I was talking about. What happened essentially was that a donation came in, which was this little badge showing this young girl, and was taken during the Second World War. And the lady is still alive. She's 79. She lives in Queensland. And the curator was intrigued by this little story and rang up to find out a bit more. And she said that she worked for CSIR in 1944, 1945. And it'd be really interesting to find out how come 15-year-olds were sent off to work at this time. But Paul goes on to talk about the whole manpowering thing and who looked after that. He brings in these other little collection items, like this little tin of butter, because that was a big issue, especially in the Pacific Campaign in the Second World War, how to preserve food. He mentions here that Val worked with Miss Plunkett along with 3 other girls, one of whom was Miss Joan Sutherland, the famous opera singer. This is an example of another little item in our collection, which was one of the sorts of things that CSIR were working on at the time. This shows them pulling apart a Japanese Zero fuel tank. Again, this is at CSIR, and you can see a young woman and a man looking at this to try and investigate how the thing was made. And the last image in the post shows Val's father, who was an engineer in the Second World War, working on a tank somewhere in the Middle East, I think, in Syria. So in this one post, he's drawn together a whole lot of different strands. It's a really lovely story. He's written it beautifully, and I would be absolutely astonished if there weren't other collections in Australia that could add to this. And surely everybody's got something about Joan Sutherland. For one thing, there must be lots of souvenirs and stories about her, if not about CSIR and other issues of that sort. And Mrs. Briggs is still alive and living in Queensland.